It's been a little while since a straight up ghost story hit me like that. So, there are going to be spoilers pretty quick into this review. What I will say up front before I get into any specifics about what happened in this episode is that I spent a good chunk of the review of episode 2 saying that I didn't understand what the show was doing. I think I do now. And I'm open to the possibility that I may be wrong, and maybe as I see more episodes as they come out, that I will reevaluate this interpretation. But I think I understand now. And if I'm right, I can totally get behind it. And this was strong. This was powerful. This was really good. Holy Ghost. So, it took me a little while to start to incline my head towards having a conclusion about where this thing was going. This thing, not so much this episode, but this series. Because the episode itself is not a particularly atypical ghost story. It hits most of the tropes that you would expect a ghost story to hit in terms of, the sorts of events that happen, the sorts of things people see, the underlying cause of it all, even the way it gets resolved is not particularly unique. It just has to do with the layering and the thematics of what Lovecraft Country is doing as a whole. So, it starts out with Letty, and she's bought a house. And it's an odd note to start on, given that we came off the last episode with George dying. And that's going to keep, evidently. I figured it would. I didn't think he was going to come back to life. But, we have seen people get shot and be effectively healed after it. So I wasn't completely prepared to rule it out. Looks like they're going to make that permanent. So I miss George. Not going to lie. But I think it actually helps the narrative in terms of what's going on with Atticus and Letty and the people of their generation for him to be gone, because he was a stabilizing force. And I think it is to the benefit of the theming that they not have many or any of those and are fumbling around in a world that has a very specific prescribed role for them. So that works. We got a bit more context for at least elements of that opening first episode dream sequence that I still don't like. But we got a little context for the Jackie Robinson and the I've got you, kid thing that happened, and that was nice. That boosted it a little. I still don't like it as an opener at the very least. So like I said, fairly typical haunted house story. They move in, there are odd things, something seems to want them out of the house. The main complication versus your standard ghost story is the fact that they're not only being threatened from inside the house, they're being threatened from outside the house, because you have the white neighbors who are openly hostile. They park cars in front of the house and tie bricks to the car horns, so the car horns are blaring in front of this house day and night to try and ensure that they don't sleep. Eventually they burn a cross. Eventually some of them break in the house with the intention of messing up whoever they find. That doesn't go too well for them. And we ultimately get a backstory of a scientist who was doing human experimentation on black victims in that house. And then we have the eventual expunging of that guy's ghost through the unifying of the tormented spirits of all his victims. And that was the part that hit me really hard, because Not so much the concept, but because of the way it was executed. And this is probably going to be difficult for me to say, but just bear with me while I get through it. So, when we see these ghosts of his victims, they are mutilated. They are monstrous. They are the deformed husks that he made them into. But that's also what he always saw them as. He always saw these people as inhuman. That's why it was acceptable in his mind to experiment on them and to kill them. About as casually as the woman that they bring to help them cleanse the house kills a goat for its blood. And the fact that as these spirits of the victims surround the ghost of their tormentor, and they gain strength, bit by bit, they lose the monstrous elements. They gain power by being human again, by not being what he saw them as, what he tried to, he succeeded in forcing them to be. As they gain power, they are more human. And they have more strength as they are recognized by each other and the audience as being people. And that gives them strength over someone who would never allow them to be seen as people. That hit me pretty hard. It's been a while since something like a ghost story has done that. Now, circling back to what I started with me saying, I think I kind of get what the show as a whole is doing now. Because when it started, and I realized it was going to be a haunted house and a ghost story, I got nervous, in addition to the fact that I was kind of left a little befuddled at the end of the second episode as it stood. Because it was leaning into something that I can't think of firm examples off the top of my head for this, but it is something that I come across and just starts to wear on me over time, which is what I can only describe as the unluckiest people on the planet syndrome. And it's something where your lead characters just keep stumbling randomly upon more and more of whatever the kind of thing they're always dealing with is. Now, in some narratives, will go out of their way to provide a mechanism for why they keep stumbling across this. Something like Doctor Who, the TARDIS takes them all across time and space. He doesn't fully control it. And there's always implication that there were a ton of adventures where not anything really went wrong in between the ones that we see. So that's how they cover their butt. Buffy the Vampire Slayer introduced the idea of the concept of the Hellmouth, which actually draws all these demons and monsters to them. So yeah, of course they're always encountering this stuff. It's naturally drawn to where they are. But if there isn't a mechanism in the story, it can bother me. So at first it was bothering me that Letty and Atticus had gone all the way to Massachusetts from Chicago to... And there they encountered this horrific stuff, supernatural horror. And then they come back and they run into it again. And it's not even really connected to the stuff they already ran into. It's just, they're just now going to keep running into this. I was prepared to chalk it up to unluckiest people on the planet syndrome. But then I thought about how the supernatural horror elements of this show are being tied to the horrors of racism that these characters are dealing with. They're not analogous. They're not a one-to-one, as should be evidenced by the fact that the supernatural things are killing white people with pretty on a regular basis here. So it's not a case of being straight up the supernatural is the racist oppression, but the show is tying them together. It is tying the supernatural horror to the horror of day-to-day living under a system and around people who at best have no regard for you and at worst would like you to not exist at all. And it is drawing connections, particularly in tone and mood, with those things. And the reason why, once I thought about that, I'm okay with the fact that they left Artem, went home, and ran into more supernatural stuff is because it's not like they're going to be able to travel somewhere and not run into racism. So if we're tying the supernatural elements, or at least the nature of supernatural horror, to the nature of racial prejudicial horror, why should we be surprised that they go to a completely different place and encounter it again? Of course they do. Because it's everywhere. So I feel like I'm... My mother's dog, who I'm watching right now, just decided to stretch out on the floor. Okay. Thanks, Orion. Thanks a lot. So I'm now okay with something that otherwise would have bothered me, because I'm recognizing the thematic relevance. And that's something that I do more often. It's a very fine line, and it's a tough needle to thread with me sometimes, about having a thematic justification for something that maybe doesn't have full narrative justification. But if the theming is resonating with me fully, then it can work. I can roll with that. And it helps if the narrative isn't 100% junk. Like, thematic resonance, it kind of fails if I'm not engaged in the narrative at all. And here the narrative is pretty good. With the thematic theming, it is even better. Thematic theming? What the... Oh, God. Someone's going to clip that and make me look like an idiot by posting it out of context. If I was smart, I would remove it from the video. But I'm not going to, because I'm friggin' lazy. So we'll wrap it up there. They did actually end up hooking up Letty and Atticus for real. I guess I kind of figured that would happen eventually. I'm slightly more okay with it here than when they teased at it when they were in Artem. I guess because that had the added frustration for me of, you're getting horny in this situation under these circumstances? Really? And then it turned out, to be a illusion and all this other stuff, and I'm like, fine. Whereas here, it feels like a much more natural outgrowth of where they are right now, and it's not a situation where where you would scream at somebody for stopping to have happy crotch pounding times, like I would have if they'd done it for real while they were in Artem at that friggin' house. So I don't love it, but I'm more okay with it than when they did the fake out version of it. So there's that. I think that's everything. I'm really excited to see what else this thing's got, because again, I don't know for certain. I don't presume that I know exactly what the hell's going on in terms of the intent of the show, but at the very least, what I think it's doing, I like and I'm here for. Lovecraft Country, Episode 3, Holy Ghost. What'd you think? Whatever you thought, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Usual stuff. Like, share, subscribe. I have a Patreon. Of course, who doesn't these days? Well, in my case, it's actually what is paying my bills and ensuring that I'm able to eat. So any help you can grant me there is appreciated. I also have a tip jar if you're only up for one-time donations. But even if you're not able to do that, like, sharing, subscribing, commenting, all of that helps and is greatly appreciated. But you don't have to do any of it. And take a relaxed attitude around here. So just come on back next time you need a break.